George Dollar, Mr. Fundamentalist, as some call him. I'm the director of the Bible for Today, 900 Park Avenue, Collingswood, New Jersey. We're interviewing Dr. Dollar with many questions, almost 2 hours in length. This is available in video cassette form by writing to Bible for Today and ask for number 1334 VCR. Send us a gift of $25 and we'd be glad to send you a VHS type recording of this particular video cassette. Or if you'd like to have it in tape recorded fashion, please send us a gift of $5, Bible for Today, 900 Park Avenue, Collingswood, New Jersey, and request number 1334. We'd be glad to send you the video cassette or the regular cassette if you would write us and send us these gift amounts. Now here's our interview with Dr. George Dollar of St. Petersburg, Florida. This is on the 10th of August, 1985, and we're pleased to have Dr. George Dollar here in his own home being interviewed for our Bible for Today friends. This is Dr. D.A. Waite, director of the Bible for Today, 900 Park Avenue, Collingswood, New Jersey. Dr. Dollar, welcome to our telecast or broadcast or interview.
Thank you, and it's good to be with you again, as always.
What has brought you down to the St. Petersburg area, Dr. Dollar?
Well, I've been in the area about a year now, and that is actually in St. Petersburg, teaching at, first of all, at St. Petersburg Theological Seminary, and now Academic Dean of Liberty School of Theology, a ministry of Liberty Baptist Church in St. Petersburg. So these are the present ministries.
And what was that first ministry, and would you define it a little bit?
Well,
tell us about both of them, if you would,
all right. First, St. Petersburg Theological Seminary was begun 2 years ago in a local church, First Evangelical Baptist Church, as a college and a seminary. A year ago, it changed its name to St. Petersburg Baptist Seminary, and 6 months ago, changed its name to St. Petersburg Theological Seminary. It was originally a Baptist school, and now it's Baptistic and interdenominational. About 35 or 40 students. They have evening classes at 4300 Central Avenue in St. Petersburg, and it's having a difficult time getting off the ground because it has no actual church connection. It has not made a strong, sharp fundamentalist image in the community and probably will not make that. The second one is a different situation entirely. 15 years ago, a young man came to this area by the name of J. Levon Lowe, who had attended Bob Jones University and began Liberty Baptist Church with 19 members. The Lord has wonderfully and graciously blessed so that now he has a very large property, 2,100 members.
What is the address of that church?
9401 4th Street North in St. Petersburg. And
2,100 members.
2,100 members. Sunday morning, even in summer, they run about 800 or 900 people in church. Very active youth ministry, very active Christian day school. And beginning this fall, we hope with about 75 students to open the doors to Liberty School of Theology, which will be basically this fall in an institute course.
That's where you're connected.
That's where I'm connected now as academic dean. I'll be teaching 4 of the 7 courses we'll be offering on Monday and Tuesday evenings.
I noticed you have a catalog here. Let me just get it if I might.
If you find.
Ask you about
some
of the courses. Before I do, where did your pastor get his training? What is his background? And
he grew up in South Carolina and is a product of the ministry of several good fundamentalist men in South Carolina, including that of Dr. Harold Seitler, Tabernacle Baptist in Greenville, whom he greatly appreciates and I think is one of the finest fundamentalist pastors in all of the South, and his church shows that, and also his college and orphanage and his radio broadcast. Then he attended, I think it was either 2 or 3 years at Bob Jones, did not finish up his course, so busy preaching, having evangelistic meetings, and feeling the Lord wanted him out. And so he had about, I think, 2 or 2.5 years of university training, and that's all.
I see. What is his position on the various versions of the Bible and all these?
No versions at all. Only the King James is ever used, ever allowed. And we are definitely a King James school, one of the few, I guess, left that will make. I heard just recently of one school that has been noted as a King James school, but now is using the Westcott and Hort in class. Yes. And they're Maranatha Baptist in Watertown, Wisconsin. I was greatly shocked by that.
Tell us about what you've known about that situation, Dr. Dollar.
Well, I was there the first year the school began in 1968 under Dr. Cederholm, and appreciated so very much his sacrificial work and
yes, very fine gentleman.
Dr. Weeks and Dr. Hollywood and those men who suffered so much in the Minnesota mess and came over there.
From the Conservative Baptist background.
Conservative Baptist background, and then the Clearwaters complex in Minnesota.
Yes.
And they came over in '68 and took over this Catholic school property and started and have worked very diligently to build a good, sound school. And Dr. Cederholm retired, of course, as president 2 years ago. And just this summer I heard, I hope this is not true, but I did hear that they're now using Westcott and Hort in class. This is a departure from the image of the school and from the fundamentalism of the school.
They always use the Texas Receptus here before, and very strong.
Yes, very strong. But now I understand they're using Westcott and Hort, or allowing it, or having it, which is, of course, the camel in the tent store.
Yes, sir. Well, that is too bad. But this school here is a
absolutely no other.
And they will use probably the Masoretic traditional Hebrew text.
That's all.
Hebrew, and
that's
the
all.
Texas Receptus
that's
and the
all.
Greek New Text.
That's all we'll allow. And if anybody wants to bring something in, they'll have to take it right back out.
Well, this is certainly a lovely catalog for your first year. Dr. Dollar, would you like to tell us if we can order more or get more?
Yes, we'd be glad to.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Well,
also,
Liberty School of Theology is, first of all, a church ministry. We are a local church and a fundamentalist independent Baptist church. No connections with any even fellowship or association or convention. The pastor has maintained and does today maintain a strong, ruggedly individualistic, independent position. He feels that even in fellowships and associations, as things change and drift as they do, then if you're part of it, then you're dragged along with it or embarrassed by it. And that's happened, of course, as you know so well in the GRB.
Yes, it has.
It's happening in the Baptist Bible Fellowship, and on it goes. So this church and this school is totally, completely, absolutely independent. He told me when I first met him.
Yes, how did you get in touch with him? That might be.
Well, I went by the church just to see the property about 2 or 3 months ago, and we got talking, and he asked me who I was, and of course I'm very humble about who I am, as I know you are, and we don't want to say, but I handed him this, which I have here, and he looked at it and said, well, as of now, we just began Liberty School of Theology.
Is that right?
He had been
looking. He just talked to you at one thing, and he wanted to start right out.
Right then, that day.
Let me, since you're so humble and you don't like to read anymore, I like to read my credits. Education. Dr. Dollar was born in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. We were up there in St. John preaching in the Fundamental Baptist Church, as I mentioned to him earlier, several years back. Saved under the ministry of Gypsy Smith at the age of 20. The education, he went to Teachers College in New Brunswick, Canada. His Bachelor of Arts was from Gordon College in Massachusetts. Bachelor of Divinity was Gordon Divinity School. He's got a THM, Master of Theology, from Emory University, and Master of Arts degree from Boston University, right there in Boston, Massachusetts. A PhD, and that would be in history, would it not?
History, yes.
In Boston University also.
Correct.
An honorary literary Doctor of Letters, is that?
Doctor of Literature.
Doctor of Literature from San Francisco Baptist Seminary, Dr. G. Archie Weniger. When your book came out on the history of fundamentalism, as you mentioned, he gave that degree to you, and that certainly is a fine honor. And then pastorates, Second Baptist Church, Newton Falls, Massachusetts, Bethany Baptist in Madison, Georgia, State Baptist Church in Casey, South Carolina, Bethany Baptist in Casey, South Carolina, Maranatha Baptist in Dallas, Texas, Faith Baptist in Statesboro, Georgia, Fourth Baptist, Minneapolis, Minnesota, associate pastor there. And then the teaching ministry, Dr. Dollar, where I think our friends and viewers would like to see that and hear about that. The Columbia Bible College, Columbia, South Carolina, from 1950 to 59. He was teaching at Dallas Theological Seminary, which is my alma mater. In 1952, I graduated, and again in 55. He was teaching there from 1959 to 1968. And then Piedmont Bible College, he was vice president there from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 1968 to 70. He was teaching at Bob Jones University, Greenville, South Carolina, 1970 to 76. He was dean of Central Baptist Seminary, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1976 to 80. And he's been pastor of the New Testament Baptist Church, Sarasota, Florida, 1981 to 84. And the author of History of Fundamentalism in 1973 and The Fight for Fundamentalism, 1984. And the New Testament and New Pentecostalism, 1978. So when he saw what you were in which you had each stat as that.
Yes.
Then you were beginning the graduate school of theology. That's
Yes.
what he did.
And there was one thing that prompted him to ask me to help, and that was this. He said for several years now he has been very, very disillusioned by the fact that he would send students off to many schools, and they'd come back, and always when they came back, as he put it, they were asking the wrong questions and giving the wrong answers. And he said they were not being trained in local church ministries. They didn't seem to have the desire to be in a local church and work there that he had tried to instill in them when they were still students. And he said, I'm sick and tired of sending my students off to schools, and he named some of the best schools today. And they were coming back, and they were not the same as he sent them. So he said, I want my own school, and I want my own Bible Institute and seminary right here. And so since that, which is about 4 months ago, we've been looking at the courses. And the courses, all right, we're off.
How young a man is this pastor? What is age?
He was about 46, 47. Yes. On Monday night, we'll be teaching Genesis, the Gospel of John, personal evangelism, and ministry leadership. Now, that's a course you don't often see in schools. And what it is, it's a pastor of the church and the president of school, of course, instructing them in different phases of church work. Youth ministry, visitation, soul winning, finances. He's excellent, and he has an excellent man in the church, and everything is on a financial level is just as good as you'd find in any church across the continent. So he's going to do that ministry leadership on Monday night. Then on Tuesday night we have Old Testament survey, Life of Christ, chapel, and the book of Romans. I told him that under no condition would I help in the school unless we had a preaching chapel once a week. And he said, well, that's exactly what I want. Good. So we'll have a chapel every Tuesday night. So those are the courses. We're running on
the first hour.
Yes.
And then the second hour and third hour, you continue those courses?
Well, now, these are not, this is on a trimester basis.
Trimester basis. That's the first semester.
This is the first trimester. It'll be 3 in a year.
I see.
And the first trimester, we'll have 4 courses on Monday night and three on Tuesday night with the chapel.
And then you have year 2 lined up?
Yes, we have the year 2 already lined up.
And year
3. 3 lined up.
It's a 3-year program, then.
It's a 3-year program for those who want to continue and take all the courses. They could get a THG degree.
THG, now what would that stand?
Graduate of Theology.
A graduate of Theology.
That's a degree that Harold Seitler has used, and I think for many years Tennessee Temple used it before they went into higher status. And then you can't start a college now in Florida. There's a new law by name, college, university. You can start institute and seminary. So we're starting the seminary so we could
grant degrees to seminary type,
yes.
Not college.
Not college, no. And we're going to be giving the BRE, undergraduate institute program, really, but an undergraduate if they've had college credits elsewhere. And we've already had students to come from other colleges who want to come and take our courses. And we could give them the BRE in the seminary or MRE in the seminary. But that's as far as we've gone so far.
I see, and you're thinking and moving.
Yeah.
What would your views be on the new evangelicalism and teaching of current problems and so on with these students? And what course would that likely come in on?
It'll come in on church history. And I'll be teaching church history the second year for the all trimesters. Yeah. And now, of course, we'll be giving a course on fundamentalism as we go along. And they have my books there in the bookstore, and of course they know my position now. And so that will sort of, you want to call it stigmatize, mark, distinguish the school because of my own personal position as a militant fundamentalist.
And your courses, how many semesters or how many weeks are these?
Each one runs 11 weeks.
11 weeks.
11 weeks.
I see.
So they'll have 10 lectures in Genesis and an exam, and 10 lectures in John.
I see.
And so on it goes. Yeah.
Now you chose the 11 rather than the regular 15 for what reason there?
It's a sort of an experiment with us. We thought if we could get lay people in on a 10-week course, that might not frighten them as much as 15 or longer.
Yes.
So we're trying it this year. That could always be changed, of course. We're flexible on that. But this is the way the men thought they ought to set it up and try it. And I said, well, fine, let's go ahead and do it that way this year.
Now, I noticed your pastoral studies chairman is J. Lavon Lowe. Now,
he is the pastor of the church.
And the chairman of that pastoral department. And Christian education, John L. Huntington. Now, is he one of the workers also?
He is an assistant pastor of the church, and he's a graduate of Springfield.
Springfield
Baptist Bible College.
And your later teachers? Will they be added as you need it?
Yes, although we are at the point, and we should, this is difficult, I guess, to express, we're going to be extremely careful, because in this area where you have so many retired professors or pastors and Christian workers, I'm sure that there'll be several who want to come forward to teach. We'll have several drawbacks. First of all, many of them, without saying so, are part of the new evangelical stream of thought, and we don't want that in the church or school. Right. Secondly, so many of them have these, what I think, phony baloney degrees, DD from the Goose Creek School of Metaphysics and such wonderful places as that, and we don't want that. And the pastor and I have already decided that no honorary degrees will be recognized in our school. And so...
you be careful on the...
Very fair.
Yeah. Notice you have a course, Dr. Dollar, in your Department of Bible on dispensations.
Yes.
It's a dispensational school?
Oh, yes, dispensational.
Premillennial?
Premillennial, pre-trib, all the way.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yes, sure.
So that will be a distinctive.
Oh, yes.
Now, will they be offering, as your graduate program develops, the courses like in Hebrew and Greek and so on, coming down the line?
Well,
or what is that be at in the future?
That is a way down the line, and my present thinking is Greek, yes. Hebrew, maybe. Maybe, but not sure. I would say Greek, yes, because of Greek exposition that I want the boys to be doing when they go out of the school. Hebrew, I'm not sure of, because I remember what Sanford Mills told me years ago, and I've never got over it. He was with many years with the American Board of Missions to the Jews. He himself, a Hebrew, had written it, studied it, talked it for 50 years. And he said, don't ever teach Hebrew. Whatever you do in seminary or college, don't have them teach Hebrew. Which, coming from a Hebrew, was shocking. And I said, why? He said, because in order to get it and use it as they should, it will take so much time and so much energy that they'll not have time for anything else. And
it'll sap the other coursework.
It'll drain the energies and time, and he said, don't do it. And then I remember when I was at Dallas, in the early 60s, they sent out a questionnaire to those students who had taken Hebrew and asked them how many had kept up with the language and how many were using it. And the percentage was so low they didn't dare publish it. Now, I don't know what it was, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 6, if your guess would be as good and better than mine.
You know, last year in our Bible for Today, Baptist Bible Seminary, we call it, which is an unaccredited school, we taught Hebrew, and it's the first time I'd ever taught Hebrew, and we had 6 students finish Hebrew, and I was amazed. There were students that want to prepare for seminary, and they couldn't take it, they were working, FBI agents, and other people couldn't get it in the day school. But that was an amazing thing. Now, Greek, we had first-year Greek, second-year Greek, and we had a number of students there, but that was an amazing thing to me, because I hadn't used it too much until I had to teach it, and the fellow said, well, can you teach us Hebrew, because we can't get the Hebrew. I said, well, boy, I'm awful rusty, but it's hard. Well, Dr. Dollar, I appreciate your background on the school that you're here, and you look forward to a good, you say about 75 students?
We're hoping to open with 75 students. Of course, having a large church membership, and the pastor, of course, Sunday by Sunday, emphasizing this and exhorting the people to get in on it and so on, is a different situation from the ordinary school, starting in from scratch, trying to go out and, as they used to say, dig up hard scrabble and get students. So we already have a built-in student body in our own membership.
I noticed the administration, Reverend George Littrell,
yes,
Church and Schools Administrator, Liberty Baptist Church. Now, what is his? He's on the staff there?
He's on the staff as a school administrator. Actually, he's what they call in many schools a business manager.
I see. And
very fine Christian man.
I noticed Beverly Burke will be registrar. Now, what students?
She's a secretary in the present church setup. Yes.
Now, what will be the tuition?
We're charging $30 an hour.
$30 per trimester hour.
For trimester hour.
Is that a standard fee, or is that pretty well?
It's something that we have thought was fair, and yet was fair to us and fair to the students. And it's lower than many schools, as you know, of course. But we thought $30 an hour is something they could handle.
Yes, sir.
And even for working students, they could handle that as well.
The seminary, for instance, up in Dr. Jordan's school, Lansdale, Calvary Baptist School of Theology, just raised theirs to $100 per semester hour.
I cannot.
That's really something.
I can't see that. And Dallas is way up to way up over that, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know.
Way up there.
Right?
I mean, these schools are...
It's really a high tuition.
Yeah.
So you will be able to have students that will come in, and that will offset your salary and the other teachers that come along.
Well, yes. Oh, yes. And, of course, we have the church facilities all provided for us, so there's no cost.
Be a part of that.
Cost of no, there's
care
no
of the insurance and the building.
No, that's all given. That's all given to us by the church.
Well,
so there'll be no charge whatsoever.
Well, we wish you well on that. That's called Liberty School of Theology. Now, I noticed it's a Baptist church. Is it a Baptist church?
Oh, yes.
Yet you don't have Baptist in the name.
No.
Is there a reason for that?
I had proposed that it should be, and they said, well, it's so identified with a Baptist church and in a Baptist church. Everybody knows it's Baptist. So they didn't want to have a long name. We could have called it Liberty Baptist Institute and Liberty Baptist School of Theology in order to have a short name, I guess. But everybody knows, and this church has its accreditable standing in the area among the churches that they know it's Baptist.
I see. So that's Liberty School of Theology. Now, that's no connection with Dr. Jerry Falwell.
None whatsoever. Just the same name.
Same name,
but there are several Liberties. There's Liberty College, I think, out in Missouri, isn't it? Another Liberty.
And this is the name of the church, Liberty Baptist Church?
Liberty Baptist Church, yes.
And how old did you say the church was?
15 years. 15 years.
Well, that certainly is something to rise to that heights and that length of time.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Dollar, are there any other things that we'd like to discuss, I guess? How do you see things? We haven't talked to you for, I guess, about a year or two. Lots has happened. Do you want to bring us up to date on the current movements?
Well, as I see in fundamentalism, there's a growing apathy and a growing indifference. Now, I'm in Florida now. I've been here 4 years. And if there's a fundamentalist Sahara, this must be it.
Sahara, dry.
Dry and not interested in fundamentalism. Pastors, Christian leaders, teachers, faculty members, and retirees. The word fundamentalism to them, most of them never heard it. Most of them not interested in it. After all, this is the sun capital, and this is the fun capital, and fundamentalism doesn't go along with either sun or fun. And so I live as a sort of a Robinson Crusoe in the area. When I get out to speak in different churches, they introduce me. They will mention the books. But I've noticed time and time again, whenever the books are mentioned...
That is History of Fundamentalism and the Fight for Fundamentalism.
Yes. When I mention those, no interest whatsoever, even in sound fundamental churches. And a very interesting comment last year in St. Petersburg Seminary, I gave out the little pamphlet I have, Facts for Fundamentalists, listing of schools and mission boards and so on. And one student stood right up and said, all right, tell us, where are we? Where is this school? And before I said anything, another student said, don't you know? This man is teaching Romans and John. So you can say Romans and John is a they're militant fundamentalist classes. Don't dare say anything else. So we said nothing else.
Is that right?
So in this area, there's a great reluctance and a great reserve and a great indifference and great apathy. And as I traveled this summer, I was telling you just a while ago, as I traveled this summer, I talked to a very fine GARB pastor in Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, Michigan. He's been there many, many years, Phil Anthony. And Phil was telling me about something. He said in his area, with the shift in population and economic situations, his congregation was about half what it had been. And he said he had recently had Jack Van Impe in, who's no friend of mine, of course, but anyway, he had Jack Van Impe, and he and Jack were talking about this, and Jack said that wherever he went, he found the same apathy and indifference among Christians. Not just the world, but Christians. And of course, as I traveled this summer, I was out with some of my students at Ankeny, Iowa, at Faith Baptist Bible College, that you know about, of course, and they're running about half what they used to run.
Is that right? What do they have now, roughly, student body?
About 320.
Is that right? It used to be 600?
630 was tops.
How do you account for that?
Well, there are three things that are happening in the Bible college movement that we ought to recognize. First of all, the Bible college movement has stagnated. And that's due to faculty, trustees, and students combined. The students are coming from churches where there's little or no strong edge of either evangelism or fundamentalism. They're going to Bible schools looking for an education, but they're not looking for the things that made Bible colleges what they were in years gone by. And faculty members are facing that more and more. There's a second thing. That is, for years, out of a good heart and real charity, Bible college administrators and faculty were very easy on payment of bills, and that's caught up with schools. I had a letter from a school not very many months ago, and they were exactly $250,000 in debt. A school that you would know if I mention it, and I went for charity's sake, but it's a fundamentalist school, but for years they $250,000 in debt, and most of that debt.
One of our GRB schools?
No, it's not. Wasn't a GRB. So you escaped that. That owners, you escaped that one all right. But $250,000 in debt, and most of it was some student loans and student help and student aid programs. And I think that for a long time now, they've allowed students to come in on their promises and the promises of parents, and those promises aren't worth very much today. And so this is caught up with many schools.
That's the second reason.
And the second reason. And the third reason is simply this, that the Bible college has lost its drive and push. Simply because the heads of Bible colleges are not what they used to be. They're not the preachers we used to have. Bible colleges in the past were known for the preachers they turned out and for the preachers who were on the faculty and were heading the schools. That's not true today. They've settled down into a sort of an academic malaise, and they're getting accredited with the AABC and now with regional accreditation.
AABC,
American
Association of Bible Colleges.
Bible Colleges. And then, some of them have gone into regional accreditation, like Columbia Bible College and others like that.
Cedarville went into that.
Cedarville. And these others that have gone into it, and now Clearwater Christian College has just got accreditation, and so they're tooting their horn on that, which I think is plain foolishness. But anyway, in going into this accreditation mania, somehow they've lost the old Bible college pulse beat and heart and nerve. And then there's another reason, that would be number four. They can't compete with Falwell and Swigert, and they've just about thrown up their hands. Swigert with his tremendous television preaching, and he can preach.
Yes.
In fact, he's the only one on television that can preach. The rest of them, as far as I'm concerned, are zeros. And Falwell with his tremendous public relations and beautiful mountain there in Lynchburg, Virginia, and dragging students in by 1,000 a year more than he had last year.
Because of tuition, you think?
Because of tuition, because of the television, and this country is becoming television crazy, even Christians.
That's right.
And I hate to say it, and I don't want anybody to repeat me because you'll probably get your head knocked off, we're fighting a losing battle today. Very, very few men, very, very few churches, and very, very few schools can survive in this present terrible situation we're in. Very few. And I look for more and more schools and more churches and men to drift off into almost oblivion.
Dropping and so on.
Oh, yes.
They
dropping.
talked about the combining of two of the GRB schools. Had you heard about that?
No, which two were those?
I believe it was Western and Denver. I believe those two are talking about merging. Dr. L. Dwayne Brown is the president of one,
Denver.
I believe, and the other one, Midwest, what is the other, Western, I think is that the one that
Western
Jennings was from?
Well, he was at Northwest Baptist Seminary, I think, wasn't he?
No, that's right. So I don't know who Western would be.
Wasn't Charles Younger there?
Tom Younger used to be there. I think he's no longer, but I don't know who's, whether Ballio, I'm not sure.
John Ballio, yes, there now.
Now, if they collapse that, and I know that other schools are having a real problem, and of course they've just recently, now I'd like you to say something about the Los Angeles Baptist College. It's taken over now by Dr. John MacArthur. Now, what's set up on Baptist terms?
Well, I have three comments on that.
Presbyterianism.
3 comments on that.
Good.
I can't understand how the GARB leadership went so sound asleep or into the back roads of ignorance or whatever was stupidity that they allowed that and still kept on approving the school.
I don't either.
They should have called the shots on that school 10 years ago.
The facts were obvious then, were they?
But they were obvious then, and John Duncan has never been a militant fundamentalist and never will be.
Graduate of Dallas Seminary?
Yes, yes.
Never took a strong
Typical,
position.
no.
Yeah.
And so this approval business to me is so much malarkey.
That's the first thing about it.
That's the first thing. The second thing is that the men in the GRB who were close to Los Angeles, men in the California area, the West Coast area, and even men across the country should have long time ago told John Duncan, now listen, you make some changes or else we take you off the list and we'll put you out rather than you just drifting out and so on. And then for John Duncan to allow MacArthur's influence and MacArthur's students and MacArthur's ministry out there, to allow that to go unnamed and unlabeled and not point out and hold the line on that, of course, is to me a disgrace to the whole GARB. I can't understand how they can be so critical of what's happening elsewhere, but as I said years ago in a Pennsylvania GARB meeting, and it's the last time I was allowed to speak at it, because they passed a resolution never allow me to speak in one of their churches again in Pennsylvania, I said the trouble with you fellas is your schools, and you don't realize it. But as Dr. Woodbridge said to me one time, he said, the trouble with you and me is we know church history. And we see today, in the light of what happened in the past, and how these little drifts and little compromises and little movements grow into something big and something terrible. Well, GRB pastors, as far as I'm concerned, are no better than the liberals and the Northern Baptists who allowed their schools to drift off and to change and to switch and so on. Today, I don't recommend GRB schools. Now, that may not be something you want to publish, but I don't recommend them.
Well, I want your honest opinion. We're interviewing you, Dr. Dollar. I want your opinion on these.
I don't recommend them. I don't recommend the fellowship schools.
Now, why? Now, give us some background. Have you finished the third reason on the comment on Los Angeles?
Well, the third reason is that a long time ago, when they put John Duncan in there, they made a first-class blunder. But this is politics. And it's like the Democratic Party. The good old boys get out in the kitchen, and while the GRB doesn't smoke, there's Democrats have their cigars, but they get in the kitchen, this kitchen crew, they run the national meetings, they run the trustee boards, they run the schools, and they put these fellows in who are not qualified as fundamentalists. Some of them are qualified as academic men and some are not. But they'll put trustees, they'll put pastors in, and that is wrong, wrong, and always will be wrong. I don't care how many GRB schools do it, and they've done it at Cedarville, they've done it at Grand Rapids, they've done it at other schools. I don't have to go down the whole list. You know them as well as I do. They've put these men in, and it's been too much politics. It's just like the Minnesota political mess. It's politics, politics.
As far as your Conservative Baptist background.
Conservative Baptist and the Clearwaters thing in Minnesota. And as I mentioned to you now, Dr. Northrup's leaving up there, the last of the good teachers they had there.
Tell me about that now. What drove him out of the Minneapolis profession?
He got into the meat grinder that I got into, a Central Baptist Seminary, which is supposed to be a preacher's school, but it's a political beehive. And all the politics of the state center.
Did a number of teachers leave recently on that?
Oh, they've had, in fact, they have no teachers left when I was there. We had Mr. Barnhart there, he's gone. Dr. Maudsley, he's gone. Dr. Kim, he's gone. Ernest Pickering used to be there, and he's gone. And Ben Hetlow, who's now with Dr. Gordon, he's gone.
Dr. Robert Jordan,
yeah, Dr. Lovick's gone. Just about everybody up there, ever was anybody, is gone.
And the other man went up to North Canada or something, didn't he? I can't think of the registrar's name, Dr. somebody or other. What's his name?
Well, they had a Dr. Thornton there, and he's
Gordon, he's up at.
I think it's over Dr. Jordan. Yes, he's talking
about.
There's
another one there. I can't think of his name. Anyway, so why did Bernie Northrop?
Well, I think he got shunted out of.
Wasn't he supposed to be the next man, just like he was supposed to be the next man as pastor of the church?
He was. He was the next man academically and experience-wise. He was the next man, but politics, and he's not a politician. And he and I both have this in common, at least. We despise ecclesiastical politics.
Amen. I agree with that.
And church politics. And these associations and fellowships are riddled with it. And I just decry it, and I think it's going to bring down the house. Going to bring down the house. I'm sorry, but it is.
What is Dr. Northrop doing now? Is he back in?
He is leaving. No, he's leaving the Ministry of Teaching and going out to be an associate pastor in Redding, California.
Is that right?
And it's a great loss. Terrible loss. I talked to him when I was in Minnesota about a month ago, and I could tell he was heartbroken over the situation, but everybody who's ever worked in Minnesota who left was heartbroken just about.
Yes. Now, as we were talking about that Los Angeles situation, and you made some comments, we got off into another area, and I want to come back to that area if we can remember what that area was. It was something regarding the GIB fellowships, I believe, the churches. I'm not sure. Do you remember what we were getting into? I want to get back to that third point. We covered the third, and I don't want to miss that other.
Well, the thing I was mentioning was that the GRB in Los Angeles, at least, and I think it's true of other schools, they've gone silent on issues. They don't teach the history of fundamentalism. They don't use the books on fundamentalism. And the students go through there, and they're like one student that I talked to one time I was preaching for. He didn't go to a GRB school. He went to another, quote, fundamentalist school, good quote. And I said to him, if you believed everything they told you in chapel and class, what would you know about issues? He said, nothing. Now, I want to say something, and I hope it's not taken the wrong way. If all our medical schools were operated like our Bible colleges and seminaries, they'd put all the faculty members in jail.
In what way do you mean?
If we sent students to medical schools and they learned little or nothing of what was wrong with the situation today,
their bodies and all.
They knew nothing about the physical bodies, the physical setups, the ailments, the diseases, and so on and so on. If they went there and became positive, like their teachers, positive what was right, and left out the diseases and what was wrong and what were the dangers and what were the infections and so on, they'd put all those medical men in jail.
Good analogy.
And that's where these trustees and presidents and faculty members of most schools ought to be, is in jail. They have sold the movement down the river. They never mention the word fundamentalism. They don't have fundamentalists in to preach. They don't teach courses on fundamentalism. And the students go out of there not knowing a fundamentalist from a Hottentot.
You know, Dr. Dollar, I heard a comment on our GRB conference this last year in Springfield. I didn't go. I didn't attend. I teach school up to the end of June. Can't go most of the years. But this was from a responsible state missionary, one of our state fellowships, GRB fellowships. And he said the conference theme was fine. It was on revival. Everything was fine. But it was what you didn't hear was the thing that upset him.
Yeah.
Everything was positive.
Yeah.
As far as you could tell, there'd be no new evangelicalism around. There's no danger to fundamentalism. There's no communism. There's no issues. Nothing is, but just nice revival Bible preaching. Now, that's what you meant. The thing that is not said.
That's not said. They're silent on issues. They're not telling them what's wrong. The kids are totally unprepared. These fellows coming out of the fundamentalist schools and seminary today are totally unprepared to meet headlong the issues they're going to have to face and the dangers they're going to have to deal with, and the inroads of new evangelical attitudes and ideas and promotion this and promotion that and gimmick this and gimmick that. They know nothing about those things, and they're totally unprepared to go out there.
And you spoke about you and Dr. Woodbridge. The trouble with you two fellows is you know church history.
We know
church history. That's why you understand the movements. Now,
yes.
What in church history has entitled you to that guess that if we're not careful, these GRB schools and the Bible Baptist schools and all these other schools will go just like the Northern Baptist Convention and the Southern Baptist Conventions there? Now, what is there that is similar church history-wise?
Well, when I started studying the history of fundamentalism, and back about 1900, when the schools started to shift, and men started coming in because of their academics, because of their personal traits. They were nice men, nice Christian gentlemen. They were supporters of the denominational program, so on. When that started in the schools, I began to wonder. It started very early. If you remember, of course, Andover Seminary, the first one in this country. Massachusetts. The first one that had the word seminary by name, Andover Theological Seminary. It capsized in, of course, 1808.
1808.
Yes. It capsized when they put in a Unitarian.
Early?
Yes. It started to capsize. It began in 1808. Because Harvard had capsized.
I see.
Now, in the 1800s, who was their most famous professor? It was Moses Stewart, professor of Hebrew. Dr. Herbert McKeel, for many years a brilliant pastor of Schenectady, New York, hired me one time to go through and read all of the chapel messages that Moses Stewart gave, and he was one of the main chapel speakers, as the main faculty member there at Andover. I went through those and found out that he was very positive, very evangelical, very sound in doctrine, but he did not warn anybody about anything. He didn't take seriously what Paul said, that I cease not to warn everyone night and day with tears.
Acts 20.
He didn't do that. He didn't do that. And because he didn't, 100 years later, in 1908, Andover collapsed. They sold the property, gave the money to Harvard, the Unitarian school, and gave their library to Harvard, where it still is. And so
And later combined it with Andover Newton?
Andover Newton. That was they went and joined the Newton's Theological Institution, which was a Baptist school, and now, of course, it's gone the way of all ecclesiastical flesh.
But you saw that, and you read
I saw that.
Positive and not the warning.
The warning was there.
Part of that
yes.
whole collapse.
And let me bring in something biblical here, lest you think this is just wandering off in church history and going endlessly. I have a conviction that Paul told Timothy 4 things, and I list them under the 4 Ds, which I use in a sermon. First of all, he talked about doctrine. He wanted them to be sound in doctrine. He told Timothy over and over again, sound doctrine. He told Timothy about discipline, how to behave yourself in a church. And of course, that has to be a local church. That's the only one we are behaving in.
Right.
And the third one is devotion. He wanted them devoted to the ministry, to the call of the Lord, and to the Lord himself. 3 Ds. Now, that's where fundamentalism today, and that's why it's so dangerous. Because there's a 4th D. And that's what you have in 2 Timothy 3 and 4, and I call that discernment.
Discernment.
This, know, also that. And for 2 chapters, he spends those 2 chapters showing him, and I have a whole list of C's, which I alliterate there,
Is that right?
on what he discerned. First of all, he discerned conditions. In the last days, perilous times shall come. And preachers are not telling people about the perils of the times.
You're absolutely right.
And then he goes on to talk about his own conduct. You've known my doctrine, my this. Then he goes on to talk about the cost. Man who live godly will suffer persecution. He goes on to command him continue in the Scriptures, which they're not doing. They're getting into philosophy and education and whatnot. And then in chapter 6, I charge you before God, preach the Word. We're at an all-time low in fundamentalism when it comes to preaching the Word. Now, a lot of fellows get up and talk and call it preaching, but the Word doesn't come out.
Right.
Other fellows are getting up and giving the Word, but they're not preaching it. And the charge there was to preach the Word. And then he goes on into compromise. The day will come, of course, as you know, when they will not endure sound doctrine. And then the close of his life, I'm ready to be offered, and I fought a good fight, and that's the only way to close out your life, having fought a fight. Well, now, that discernment thing.
That 4th D.
And this is where your GRB schools are frantically weak today. They don't bring in men. They don't bring in men who have the discernment.
They don't want to hear them.
They don't want to hear them. And the fellowship schools are the same way. Yes, and many of the independent schools are the same way. And I've warned and warned and warned students for years, unless you warn people, you're guilty.
You're going to be weak.
You're guilty of theological treason. And I told the boys of Bob Jones one time, if you don't wake up and warn people the way Paul did, you could be the pallbearers at the funeral of fundamentalism. I don't want to be around when it dies, but I can foresee the movement dying if things don't change.
What time frame do you place that in, Dr. Dollar? School-wise, GRB-wise, Northern Baptist Convention-wise, Southern Baptist Convention-wise?
Well, I think, of course, the Northern Baptist is already gone, as you know.
Definitely.
The Southern Baptist is gone, shot. This election this year of Stanley was a complete collapse for fundamentalism inside the convention. They got him in by a squeak, but they had 20,000 votes against him. And next year, the Vice President McGuinn, who's an out-and-out liberal.
And he's the one that would embrace
yes,
Stanley, Vice President and have the lovey-dovey stuff.
Oh, yeah. And of course,
not liberal.
Oh, yes. And of course, Stanley's no fundamentalist. He's a conservative, but not a fundamentalist.
How can anybody in the Southern Baptist Convention still be a fundamentalist? Wouldn't a fundamentalist separate from...
He'd have to leave. He'd have to leave. If he had any convictions at all in fundamentalism, he'd have to leave unless it's a bread-and-butter situation, which is what... We have a man here, calls himself fundamentalist, Southern Baptist Church, and yet it's bread and butter with him. If he went out, how many would he preach to? Maybe a half a dozen, and so he can stay in and preach to 1,000. So, bread and butter.
And so that's the Southern Baptist.
As far as on the GRB, unless there's a tremendous turning around in the next few years, I predict in 25 years, the GRB will be no better than the Southern Baptist.
Is that right?
They'll have,
stage level,
I'd say 25 years, they'll be
one more generation.
One more generation. Because this generation coming up hasn't been told issues.
No.
They have not faced issues. Right. And if they do face them, the political heads and the administrative heads and the council heads knock their heads off.
That's an important decision. Now, let's get back to the Los Angeles situation just for a moment, if I could,
Yeah.
Dr. Dollar. The difference in church polity, which I think is perhaps one of the key pictures.
It will lead to the Master's College being nothing else but a new evangelical, Presbyterial type of setup as far as church and school.
Will it be successful?
Yes, it will be, because we've got so many dummies today who don't know what's going on, and so many gullible people, and so many Americans who hear his sweet voice on radio and think he's a fundamentalist.
And yet he's repudiated fundamentalism.
Oh, yes, sure, same as Graham has, but they haven't heard that.
Was he not connected originally at Bob Jones, and then his father before him on the executive board? Is
That I do not know the connection. It may have been.
I saw an article in the Fundamental Baptist Fellowship by Dr. Frank Bumpus, Fundamental News Bulletin there, May, June of '85, and he mentions in that he didn't cite the school, but he said the risk of being cast an old fundamentalist, old mossback. He said that in 1959 he checked the credentials, and he abruptly left the student body of a Christian university known for fundamentalist stance.
Well, that would be the only one there is.
That'd probably be the only one there was.
So.
And he says approximately 1 year later, his father resigned from the cooperating board
of
the same
Bob Jones.
institution.
That would be Bob Jones.
During the battle over ecumenical evangelism, both rejected the separatist position and moved firmly into the new evangelical camp with its leading spokesman, Dr. Billy Graham. Son. In fact, that Dr. MacArthur Jr. and his father repudiated fundamentalism in the midst of the battle and went over into the enemy's camp. In other words, that's what Bumpus. So as far as that's concerned, he's on that. Now, do you look for it to be in competition with Falwell,
no.
student-wise?
No.
What will he get student-wise?
No. He will get a large student body because of his national following.
What do you look for it to grow to? And when will it start? And what is it now? Do you remember what it is, LABC?
I do not.
Students? Very small school, always historically. Never amounted to too much.
No. I was thinking about roughly 150, maybe 200 could be it. Mm-hmm. I look for it this year to probably go up to 300 or 400 because of the influence of MacArthur's church, and keep growing because of his national stance and following, maybe to 1,000 or 1,500 within 3 or 4 years.
Is that right? And he'll get his faculty right from his own elders.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
Because they're all teachers pretty well themselves.
Or bring in some of the Billy Grahamites, or some of the Tim LaHayites, or some of the Bill Brightites. The whole West Coast is an ite situation.
Right.
This, and he'll bring them all in, and of course he'll have Graham's loving endorsement. He'll have Tim LaHaye's loving endorsement, and your former GRB pastor who's out there now, Jeremiah, he'll have his loving endorsement.
Jeremiah.
Oh, the whole.
Jeremiah, or David Jeremiah.
There, David Jeremiah.
He's out there, that's right.
He took over Tim LaHaye's church, you know.
That's right. He's president of the school now, too.
President of school. Heritage College. Yeah.
That's something. So the whole West Coast is an ite situation.
It is an ite.
What do you see biblically in regard to the matter of elder rule versus congregational church rule and government? Now, some of our GRB fellows have written in. I don't know whether you noticed this last Baptist bulletin. Maybe you didn't receive it, don't get it, but it came to my mother and father-in-law's house just 2 days ago, and I looked at it, and they had 2 articles. One, Master College, Los Angeles Baptist crossed off, Master College up here, no, and the other one, yes. And there were letters from readers, and one thought it was great to have a master's college and the larceny of Los Angeles. The other thought it was not great. But those that thought it was great, some of them said, we're misunderstanding the polity of MacArthur, and it's really not that important. And really, what's wrong with elders running things instead of congregational church government? Now, what is wrong, baptistically, biblically, historically, church historically, and so on? Do you see anything basically wrong?
Yes,
where is that headed?
I see a shift. I see a shift from Baptist polity into a semi-Presbyterial type of thing, or really out-and-out Presbyterial thing without calling it that. They're going into the elders thing. Some of them are doing it out of desperation. They haven't been able to run it themselves and get the people to follow them, so the elder system helps them out on that. Secondly, they have been so adamant in bringing in businessmen and business leaders, community leaders and so on, in order to get status for the church, and they've come in, and they've come in as business leaders, and they've come in as church leaders, and so the next thing is for them to be elders, which is a logical conclusion. It's a compromise and a collapse to the old Presbyterian type of eldership, which of course is not biblical. And they always go back, of course, and quote the elders of the church in Ephesus, whom Paul talked to in Acts 20. But what they leave out is, very simply, that when the Lord wrote to the church in Ephesus in the book of Revelation, he wrote to the agolos, singular,
yes, I know
the messenger,
right,
or the pastor.
Pastor, that's right.
Sure, to begin with, they had pastors. But when the church was addressed in the book of Revelation, it was a single man. The evidence of church history as far as the first century is concerned is that there were pastors or elders or overseers or shepherds.
Pastors, bishops, elders,
all the same office, the same man.
No hierarchy.
No hierarchy.
He may have had assistants and helpers,
yeah,
but this was the one lead, like Christ is the head of the church, not two heads.
Yeah,
right?
But I expect your GRB pastors to fall into that trap because they've been supporting a hierarchy for years. Their council of 18 or 21 is a hierarchy.
18, you're right.
And the ones who run the convention each year is they're a form of hierarchy.
You're going to call it a convention, but that's what you're calling it.
It is a convention. It is a convention. They can call it anything they want, but it's a convention. They run it just like the Northern Baptist and the Southern Baptist and the Conservative Baptist.
I understand it was quite low in attendance. It didn't get up to over 2,000 in the Wednesday meeting, I was told and reported, and I don't think the total ever reached the 4,000 that many times that they hold.
Well, I wish the people all stay home and stay away from the thing, and then maybe they wise up.
And I also heard that for the first time in its history, they lost more churches than they gained. They went actually down in numbers of churches.
Yeah.
I think they lost. I think they had a net loss of 4 or 5 or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
Well, how do you see that?
Well,
a lot of them were objecting, I think, some of the good churches, because they weren't strong enough separatists.
Yeah.
They pulled out.
Yeah.
They're disgusted.
Yeah.
Others, of course, collapsed, and others
Sure.
moved and so on. But how do you look at that?
Well,
Paul Tassel has called for 86 more in 86.
Yeah, well, that's another call. 1 million more in 54, and every Baptist a tither. I know in the convention deal back in the 50s, 1 million more in 54, and every Baptist a tither.
Exactly.
All that cliche junk that Paul knew nothing about, and if he's here today, he would spit in their face over
Paul
it.
the Apostle.
Paul the Apostle is not getting along with Paul Tassel, no. No, the thing has drifted badly, and they're guilty of conventionism and cooperation and compromise. The 3C Club, and they ought to change the name.
Conventionism, compromise,
and cooperation. And they ought to change the GRB to the 3C Club. The 3C Club.
Those 3C just
yes, 3C Club. Because
cooperation, compromise.
Yes, because they now in this paper that they would publish 2 sides of something. That's like publishing 2 sides to the doctrine of the virgin birth, 2 sides to the doctrine of separation, which is what it is, and the 2 sides to whether Christ rose the 3rd day or not. I mean, this is a Baptist position for years, and now they're given 2 sides of it. That's the old liberal leaven that Paul said will leaven the whole lump.
What is your understanding, Dr. Dollar, of Nicolaitanism? And
well,
is this not the John MacArthurism? Is this not, in essence, a Nicolaitan type of a situation?
It's a form of Nicolaitanism, as you know, Nikao and Laos, the conquering of the people, and putting it in the hands of priests, as the Catholics did, and Protestants.
These pastors, these ordained men, run the whole show.
And these Baptists, who have never been Protestants, acting like a bunch of Protestants and Catholics stuck together. Well, you see, they're not teaching Baptist history as it should be taught. Because if they taught Baptist history, they'd be teaching separation. They don't dare do that because the supporters wouldn't be along with them. And so they're not teaching separation, separationist Baptist history. They're not teaching fundamentalism. They're not teaching discernment. And so what else do you expect but these oddball ideas and drifts that are going on?
Now, in the New Testament, did the elders only take charge of calling the first deacons? Did the elders only send out the missionaries in Acts 13?
No.
Did the elders only deal with a business meeting in Acts 15?
No.
Was it congregational?
It was congregational. It was congregational.
The multitude was called together.
Of course. And he said, "Look ye out." Well, the ye there is the congregation. He didn't have a committee meeting and get in a back room and have coffee and say, "Now, boys, what do you think about this? And how much money has he got? And how much is he going to contribute to the program and to the school?" They didn't go through that foolishness.
When Paul went back to visit these churches, did he visit only the elders there? Or did he visit
the church.
And when he wrote back to them, did he write over?
He wrote to the saints. He wrote to the saints.
All at the church.
To the saints.
The church at Thessalonians.
The saints.
And did the Lord Jesus do the same? You mentioned Revelation.
Yeah.
He didn't say the elders.
No. He wrote to the messenger.
The messenger of the church.
Yes.
The church.
Sure.
Right,
always do. No, they have departed, but they departed from the biblical doctrine of separation. They might as well depart from the biblical doctrine of deacons. They might as well.
Also the church autonomy. And the
yes.
Local church
Yes. They departed from so many things.
Now, if the church layman or anybody has no meetings, no business meeting, no nothing, how do you see 1 Corinthians 12 with this member of the body, this member of the body in a local church working and giving the gifts? How do you see that? Nobody can give any wisdom.
He can't work. He can't work.
Does wisdom,
he's stifled.
Does
he's
wisdom
completely stifled.
rise and set in the minds, the intelligence of just those elders?
Not according to the New Testament, no.
There has to be some input.
Sure. Oh, sure. Sure, all the way through.
Now, from your vantage point of church history, Dr. Dollar, what has been the history of Nicolaitan-type churches? That is, churches that are strong, dictatorial, with the people having no say, no nothing, as far as theology, as far as heresy, as far as the false doctrine coming in, as far as the whole thing. What group of churches is stronger? What group is weaker as far as historically? If you've got a strong central government versus a breakdown so that you have some input. What is your historical perspective?
Well, the Catholic Church, of course, is the major example of the hierarchy. But in Protestantism and the general circles of Protestantism, the Lutheran Church, the Presbyterian Church, Methodist Church, those three have built up.
Episcopal, I guess, too.
Episcopal has built up, they have built up tremendous hierarchies and put everything in the hands of a few at the top who run everything and tell everybody what to do and how much to give and so on.
And what has happened to their theology?
Their theology has gone to pieces. Their theology has collapsed.
Do you think there's any connection?
Yes.
Why?
Of course there is. Well, if you deny what the New Testament says about deacons, and you deny what it says about pastors,
and congregational government.
Yes. What would be your restraint from denying other things in the New Testament?
Are you saying that maybe John MacArthur, who denies these things, may deny other things as well?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
He thinks this is biblical. You know.
Well,
he says this is biblical.
Well, he's dead wrong.
Well, if he's dead wrong on that, how do you know he's not dead wrong on other
Well, I know he's dead wrong on other things.
All right.
On the charismatic movement, he's weak. Now, he wrote a book on it, and he's weak on that. And he and many of these pastors, and I look for this in the next 5 years to just sluice a lot of men down the drain, and that is this. They're going to compromise with the charismatic movement, and the compromise is going to be this.
You've written a book on that, too.
Yes.
And that's still available.
Oh, yes.
How can they get that? What address would they write?
They can write to me at Box 1234, Sarasota, Florida.
Box 1234, Sarasota, Florida.
That's
okay,
where
that's
all the books are.
All right, go ahead.
Well, now, on this idea of the charismatic movement, this is the compromise these fellows are going to assume. We can't withstand the Niagara of the television set, and we just can't fight against that kind of a movement. So what we're going to do is compromise, and here's going to be the compromise. They're not going to start jabbering in tongues. They're not going to start having this special baptism, getting slain in the Spirit. They're slain other ways, but not that way. But this is what they're going to do, and this has already happened. And fundamentalists are doing it, and they're dead wrong in doing it. They're going to allow for it today, even though they're not themselves participating. Here, for instance, is the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, who will go to the PTL Club and openly endorse Jim and Tammy Baker, which are the high priest and high priestess
of the Praise the Lord Club.
Praise the Lord.
And the president being...
been there several times on the Southern Baptist Convention. Going there... Stanley. Charles Stanley from Atlanta. He goes there and praises them and praises their ministry and prays for them.
Hasn't Billy Graham done the same?
And Billy Graham's home is now at the PTL Club.
Are you serious?
Oh, yes. They've moved his house out to the PTL Club on their grounds, and they've dedicated it as the Billy Graham Center.
Really?
And Graham himself has been on the program and endorsed the whole thing and so on. Now, no one says that Graham speaks in tongues, but Graham is allowing them to speak in tongues. It's this allowance business. It's this permissive business. I don't do it, but these boys are just as Christian as I am if they do it. Now, that's the compromise that's coming, and that's the compromise they made with John Duncan and with John MacArthur.
And you think that's what's coming in MacArthur land eventually down the line?
Because you're not having, among GRB today, you're not having a sharp image or conviction on the charismatic movement. You're not having it.
That's right, you're right.
They're softening, they're weakening, they're dodging it. They're silent. And the sin of silence. They belong to the SS Club.
What's that?
The sin of silence.
SS Club.
Sinners in silence.
Sinners in silence.
Yeah.
Now, if these congregational type churches, have they remained true to the Word of God longer than the hierarchical type of churches?
Yes, they have.
The Baptist churches?
The hierarchical have not remained true at all.
Why is that? Now, why is the congregational type churches where people have a say, how can they keep purer than these others?
Because if the boys at the top can grab that power and get away with it, then they also become very authoritarian and powerful in deciding which version of the Bible and what part of the Bible they're going to stand by. And if the congregation can't tell them anything, then why should they listen to the Bible?
So they're a law to themselves.
They're a law to
So
themselves.
you got a congregational type people where they call their own pastor. If the pastor gets out of line, they can
do something about it.
They can do something about
Yeah, but they can do something about it. And so
that's the distinctive that's kept churches pure down to church history.
Yes. They've had a Bible. They've had an open Bible. Luther realized that, you know, when he was at Wartburg for that year, that if the German people didn't get the Bible, just his stand would not be enough. And so he spent that whole year with Philip Melanchthon, as you know, getting the Bible into the German.
And it was
So the people.
Texas Receptus
Oh, sure.
too,
Oh,
wasn't it?
sure.
Right
Sure.
into the Lutheran language.
Sure, he didn't have that
German
Westcott and Hort and
That's
stuff
right.
to worry about.
That's
so.
a very important point.
Yeah.
That's very important. Now, the transfer of these fundamentalist schools into modernism. Now, think of MacArthur, for instance. Now, as I understand it, and I've talked to one of the men on the staff, Al Oliver, one of the elders, been there 4 years, graduate of Talbot, went to UCLA, then Talbot Seminary. He says most of them go to Talbot. He said
Sure.
a couple from Dallas, one from Western. But he said the only thing that congregation, according to their bylaws, can do is if we want to call a new senior pastor, they vote on that, that's it. They don't do anything else. Now, that means the senior pastor only is called. That means all these little elders that are also full-time paid staff workers, 35 of them currently paid staff, he told me. We have 15 more, he says, that are trained to be elders. They're on the payroll, too, but they're not quite called elders. They're in training and youth departments and so on. Now, if that's the case, it would seem to me that MacArthur can fire all these other elders because the congregation only can call the senior pastor. That means MacArthur and one or two others, if these fellows are out of line now, who's going to keep MacArthur in line if the church
Nobody.
can't, the member can't?
Nobody.
Could he go
MacArthur.
into a Robert Thiem situation?
Oh, sure. He could go. He could go Robert Thiem. He could go to Robert Schuller situation.
He could go into the charismatic.
He could get in the charismatic situation. He's halfway there anyway. He might as well go all the way.
And
but
he's smooth,
but
and
but
who knows
actually,
what his real heart is, but he talks and talks and
Yeah.
talks Bible, 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 doesn't he?
I know.
But
And
what's going to make the difference in the switch? And what's going to switch it? And where's his brakes?
he doesn't have any. And the
Do you
GRB.
consider that to be a deadly danger?
Oh, yeah,
Now
terrible.
he's taken over the school of the
Yeah.
former GRB.
Yeah. The fact that he could take it over is to me a shock. The secondly, that the GRB would operate pretty much as he's operated, because whether we want to admit it or not, the political heads of the GRB run everything, whether it's the schools or the General Conference or the Baptist Bulletin or whatnot. They run it.
That's right.
And so they've got a hierarchy at the top. So if your pastors go on with an eldership setup, they're only doing what the boys at the top have been doing for years. So the whole political setup, as far as elders, as far as the council is concerned, and the political heads and the trustees, the whole thing smacks of Nicolaitanism and is wrong.
And Christ said, I hate it, doesn't he?
Oh, yes.
In that
I
Revelation 2,
Yeah.
Ephesus and
Yeah.
Pergamos.
I hate.
I hate it. Now, in regard to the Nicolaitanism, in regard to the hierarchical setup, I understand from Los Angeles that they had a closed board, from what some have told and written in these articles, that it was a self-perpetuating board, that they weren't responsible to the churches or anybody outside of it, so really nobody could tell them what to do, what not to do, and they didn't even tell people what they were thinking of doing, the constituency. Of course, I can see a lot of the pastors that put in money in churches into that school for years and years and years when they found out about it, but it was too late. Now, what do you think about self-perpetuating boards, either of deacons in local churches or self-perpetuating boards of colleges or seminaries? Should they be answerable to the churches if they're approved by the churches? You said earlier that you don't agree with the GRB method of approval of institutions. How would you approve of it, and what should it be like, and how should it function, and should it be self-perpetuating, and so on?
It shouldn't be self-perpetuating.
Why not?
It should be church-perpetuating.
In what way would that come to be?
The only way that could be is that if you did away with this hierarchy and this politics that you've got in your system now, you did away with even trustee boards, and I think you ought to, and put it back in the hands of the churches, and let the churches operate everything. After all, the Lord said He built His church, and if they don't know what that is, they ought to read the book of Acts and find out. It was a church in Jerusalem, a church in Antioch, a church here, and a church there.
Right.
We didn't have this big umbrella, which has become a ecclesiastical canvas tent, and we've got that stuff today everywhere, even in fundamentalism, and it's wrong. It's dead wrong. It just eats away at the vitals.
That's not just school. That's mission boards.
That's
too,
mission boards. Mission boards the same way. Mission boards the same way.
It should be local church operated centers.
Sure. And if we had none of these schools that were entities on themselves, and we had schools by local churches, we'd all be a lot better off.
Now that's what you're trying to build out
yes,
in this
that's what we have. This is a Liberty Baptist Church school, nothing else. And if other churches want to help, all right. And if they don't want to help, let them go fish.
But it's a local church.
It's a local church. And until you get back to that, you're not in the book of Acts.
Well, that's an interesting comment.
Look
The same thing in the mission board, isn't it?
Mission board.
Now, is it Baptistic to have a bishop of the Methodist or bishop of the mission board telling missionaries on the field what to do and what not to do?
Anymore it is right for a school to be telling pastors how to run their churches and butting their nose into churches and sticking their nose into churches when the pastor and the people decide on something. And they're doing that all the time.
Well, I've had pastors write to schools and say, what about this? We don't agree with this. And schools write back and say, well, so what? We're doing it our way. What do you think about that attitude?
Well, that's the hierarchy. That's the political hierarchy that they've set up. Well, those pastors ought to withdraw every cent of support and every student out of those schools. And after a while, if you turn off the water, somebody will notice. And if they would just withdraw, these pastors ought to stop the whole thing. The GRB pastors ought to stop the whole thing. No more money, no more people, no more support until you boys stop this foolishness. And they should put every single school that they think they ought to have, they should put it under the umbrella of a church. And let that church pastor and that church congregation run that school and others cooperate.
Isn't that the way these schools began?
It's where they all started. Sure.
Look at Wealthy Street Baptist.
Sure.
Look at Dr. David Otis Ford.
Sure.
Now he's out in the skirts and they're against him and they think he's crazy and so on and so forth. And his text on the King James Version and he's looked down upon, but yet it started in his church.
Sure.
And I think the same with New York.
Yeah.
Johnson City
was in a church, was in a First Baptist church, or Johnson City.
Why did they get away? Just popularity, you think?
Well, status, they have to be accredited, they have to be accepted, they have to be academic, they have
buildings and dormitories.
And then they bring in some of the world's biggest parasites into the faculty meetings and the trustee meetings and put them in the head of departments, and they know no more about a local church than a grasshopper knows about running the city of Hong Kong.
Now, Dr. Dollar, you've been to a number of schools and so on. Do you have any comments on where the schools are headed, where they're going, and so on? Now, you mentioned earlier that there was a conference at Piedmont Bible College that was years ago, 68 to 70 and so on, where things sort of blew up with Dr. Woodbridge there. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, Dr. Woodbridge came in 1970 at my request to give us wonderful message on what new evangelicalism was, and come to find out the president and many of the faculty and trustees were out and out new evangelicals, but hadn't labeled themselves in what it was. And, of course, we had a big blow-up, and I left that year, and Dr. Woodbridge and I were hung in effigy in chapel.
Is that right?
Yeah. No. Called everything, and I have the tape, which is a disgrace to a school and so on. The school ever since has drifted from bad to worse.
Is that right? Now, you were there at Columbia Bible College, 50 to 59. Now, when did your convictions on separation and fundamentalism and new evangelicalism really begin strong? When did this begin to be more of an issue with you?
Well, late in the 50s, while I was still there, I was worried about the fact I had left the convention in 54, Southern Baptist.
Oh, the
Southern Baptist.
That was your background.
I left that in 54 and started an independent church.
Is that where you were in Dallas, Texas, Southern Baptist?
Well,
South Carolina, Casey, South Carolina, and Madison, Georgia?
Bethany Baptist in Casey. Bethany Baptist in Casey. State Street Baptist was a convention church which I left. Bethany Baptist was one I started, which was an independent church, and still is. Still is.
I see.
When I started the church,
that was
1954.
Yeah.
When I started that church, I saw what was wrong with the convention, but I was not that closely associated with nor informed on schools in general, and I certainly wasn't informed on fundamentalism because there were no books to read, and I couldn't find the papers, and I couldn't find anybody who knew about it, so I just let it drift until I went to Dallas in 1959. When I went in 59, I decided to find out what fundamentalism was, and for 14 years, I studied it, worked in it, and became a convinced militant fundamentalist, and put the book out in 1973, The History of Fundamentalism.
Right? And that's where you really began
to
do some
and research. And the more I researched fundamentalism, the more I saw that these churches and schools and fellowships and conventions had left and departed and drifting away from it.
And so that's why you got then in connection with Bob Jones University
Yes.
at 1970, and that's when they
76.
published that in 73, didn't they?
73, yeah.
And then you went on to the
76 to Central Baptist Seminary,
which was a fundamentalist
was
type.
supposed to be a fundamentalist school. I found later it was not, but it's
What
supposed
way?
to be. Well, the president told people behind my back that he didn't agree with my definition of fundamentalism. He didn't have one, but he didn't agree with that. And he said in class, when I didn't know it at the time, he said in class that he was not a second-degree separationist. He told me that.
Really?
Told me that.
I thought all of his literature and
Well,
standards
yes,
smacked with
because
that.
he wanted to appeal to that constituency for support. But he personally was not.
Is that right?
He said, I'll die and I'll never be a second-degree separationist. And he had been spending 20 years separating from everybody. He was the third, second, third, fourth, fifth-degree separatist. Didn't know it.
Wow.
But he carded me for it because I put in the book what a militant fundamentalist was. And come to find out he was a militant as a leader, but not a militant fundamentalist. And he still isn't.
Militant, if he could get his way.
He would get his way, and militant in politics, and militant in maneuvering the Minnesota Baptist Association and Pillsbury College and so on. Of course, last year they had a terrible break up there with 26 faculty members left.
At Pillsbury?
At Pillsbury.
Is that right?
And they're down student body less than 400.
Is the president still there? What's his name?
Dr. Rammel is still there.
What does he think about all this?
He doesn't dare think. He has to
Doesn't dare think?
has to go to Clearwaters to find out what to think.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And is it going to survive, Pillsbury?
As a small little Minnesota Baptist Association school, it'll survive, yes, because they're so loyal to Minnesota that they would support it if it would start selling milk instead of preaching the word.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, other schools, I wanted to touch on how developments are, if you know, in San Francisco Baptist Seminary, and also this Tennessee Temple situation. And I think, would you like to comment on either of those or both?
Well, since Dr. Archer Weniger, your good friend and mine, passed off the scene,
Certainly miss him.
so much. San Francisco has been in the doldrums and will continue to be.
Is that right?
There's no
Student-body-wise?
student body-wise and support-wise and churches helping and so on. The Tennessee Temple situation, of course, is one that has not been discussed too much and nothing in print. But, of course, they put in a very, very weak man, although a very fine Christian man, but a very weak man in the pulpit.
Dr. Lee Roberson, when he retired?
When he retired, put in Dr. Faulkner, who is not a preacher and is not strong enough for it. Fine Christian gentleman, just as nice as Bill Gothard is, and just as wrong as when it comes to preaching. So the school and the church have greatly declined, and now, of course, they've turned to J. Don Jennings to take it out of the lift, bail them out of their doldrums.
Well, I thought he was president of Northwestern
I
Seminary.
thought so, too, and all of a sudden he's now president of Tennessee Temple. These fellows switch around. It's a wonderful thing. The Lord didn't change his mind until we got the jet planes, but now the Lord can change his mind, you see, every year and call him to the West Coast one year and call him to the East Coast next year. And with the jet planes going commercially, why?
Makes it easier.
The Lord has providentially arranged things to help out these fellows. This is incredible. It is incredible that things like this should happen.
He was a pastor of a local church before that, was he
He was
not?
pastor in Ypsilanti.
And he was on the International Board of Baptist, ABWE, I think.
ABWE, yes, he was in that for a while, and then he's gone out to Northwest, and now he's come to Tennessee Temple.
What's going to happen at Tennessee Temple? What has happened? Why did he come? And
well,
I understand he's trying to get Wendell Kempton out there to be president of the Northwestern or something.
I understood that. Kempton they tried to get Kempton to come, I think, to Tennessee Temple for the school there, and he wouldn't, and I understood they...
Trying to get him back to Northwestern to take his place?
Yes, I think
so. He won't leave ABWE, will he, with all that multi-million-dollar setup there?
I doubt that he will.
They tried to get him at BBC up in Baptist Bible College at Park Summit. He didn't leave there before Jackson went in.
Well, he wasn't qualified for either one, but...
As far as background training and so
on? No. And the whole time he was in Dallas, he never attended a Baptist church, and here he is head of a Baptist mission board. I don't swallow that kind of baloney. I just don't swallow.
If you're going to be a Baptist, you better be a Baptist.
I think you ought to have some convictions, not just connections.
That's good. Credentials, convictions, and not connections.
Yeah.
Well, what's going to happen at Tennessee Temple? What did happen? Why did they change? Who was the the former president, and why did he leave? And did they kick him out, or did he resign?
No, Dr. Robertson, who had retired and wanted to go on the road after a long and wonderful pastorate there, had built up a great church and a good school in many ways. But he retired 3 years ago because of age and retirement, and they put in Dr. Faulkner, who...
Was he the president of the school?
He was associate pastor then, and he became pastor of the church and president of the school.
I see.
And actually was not qualified to run either one.
I see.
And here he was trying to carry 2 caps, and he couldn't even wear one of them. So that petered badly, and the school went down in student enrollment, and the church
went. How many did they normally have when Dr. Robertson was there?
It was supposed to be about 3,800. That's the figure that usually floats around, and it came down to 2,500, 2,600.
Is that right? Down 1,000.
Down 1,000. Down 1,000. And the people left the church in droves.
Really? Because of the lack of good preaching?
Lack of good preaching. And
what size church is that out there?
Well, the new auditorium seats 7,000.
Is that right?
Seats 7,000. Of course, they have this multi-church membership. They have this church plus 65 others, and they count all their members, and they get close to 65,000 members.
Oh, is that right?
Now, for you fellows up north, that's incredible, impossible, and unreal. But they use.
Do it legitimately?
Oh, they can do many things in the South, and the law is the law of the Medes and the Persians, which has been broken so many times that it doesn't matter what we do now.
So what do you think is going to be done with Jennings? Is he going to be on the scene now in September? Starting?
No, he'll come down once a week until the 1st of October. I think this is the latest arrangement.
I see.
He'll fly down once a week to give some kind of supervision or direction, and then move as of the 1st of October to the scene.
Who they got lined up for Northwestern Seminary?
You better ask the politicians. Don't ask.
Every politician will put their
Oh
name
yes,
in.
oh yes. Don't ask me. I'm not a politician. I'm a preacher and fundamentalist.
Do you have any guesses?
Oh, Kempton will be asked, and he'll turn it down. And then they'll go to the trustee board and see who has a DD.
How about John Milheim?
John Milheim.
Who's been shaken up, I guess, a little bit out of the
he would be better than
Johnson City.
He would be
at the Baptist Bible College.
He'd be a good candidate, and would probably do a good job.
You know anything about the setup there?
I just know it
A little shake-up.
from Dr. Delnay, who's now at Faith Baptist in Ankeny, because he was a student of mine at Dallas.
Dr. Delnay.
He was there teaching, and he left it because of the Milheim mix-up.
Situation.
Yeah, he left
I understand they brought this man in from from Jack Wirtzen's thing, the name of Dr. John, what's his name? John Masters.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the academic dean for everything, and he replaced John Milheim, who was over the seminary, and now Milheim is only a teacher. I know that wasn't favorable to John and Milheim, but Masters now is more or less the overall everything. And I understand there's some difficulty there. Mark Jackson, the president, I guess, is backing Masters, but I guess there's a lot of people on the trustee board that are questioning some of Masters' decisions. And if they don't straighten out, I think either one or both of them, Masters and Dr. Jackson, one or both, will be leaving before too long. Now, have you heard anything about this situation?
Just a general
Some of the
rumble.
teachers have left. Now, Milmay, is that the name of?
Delnay, Dr. Robert Delnay.
In other words, they let go this different teachers. Some have left, some have gone, and so on, for different reasons.
Well, it's perfectly wonderful because they do it at the top level of the GRB. Why don't they do it in their schools? They do. And so the political the ring around the rosy deal that goes on in these schools, they've learned it from the hierarchy. They learned it from the council, which is a little hierarchy of a convention, whether they want to say so or not. And when they arrange the program each year at the national meetings, it's the same kitchen crew that arranges this and arranges that. And if a man can't preach, but he's a first-class theological dodo, but he supports the program, that's the same old Southern Baptist malarkey, put him on the program and we'll see if we can endure it. Well, why not have your mix-up at the local level? It's politics, 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 and I decry the whole thing. I don't think the Lord has a thing to do with it.
Yes. Well, Dr. Dollar, do you have any other insights that we should tap your brains on? We've kept you busy here. This is about an hour and 20 minutes so far, and I know that you have other things to do and so on, but do you have any other things that we should perhaps discuss that would be helpful to our Bible for Today people and of interest to them?
Well, I would like to suggest something, and that you restudy and reenact the book of Acts. Local churches, local pastors and deacons, soul winning, witnessing, doing everything in and with and by a local church, that you restudy and reenact that. Because if this thing continues the way it is, and more flim-flam goes on, in the name of fundamentalism even, and more drift and more of these compromises continue, we're going to be forced back, and the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned, to the book of Acts, which is local churches, local pastors, local deacons, and local congregations, studying the Word.
Local schools, local missions.
Local everything. Local everything. Let's have it like it was in the book of Acts. We've gone far afield of that, and I decry it, and I think we're paying a horrible price, and we're going to pay more of a horrible price.
That's the most astounding suggestion, yet it shouldn't seem astounding to Bible-believing fundamentalist Christians that claim to believe the Word of God, is it?
It should be the average, everyday Christian's concept and aim, and a local church and a pastor's aim.
Why will it be met with such frustration and animosity by all these hierarchical people when you suggest it?
Because they haven't suggested it in the first place. In the second place, they love authority. They love to be called such leaders as they are in their places. They love the bureaucratic office type thing. They love to be national leaders of something or other. They love the whole academic setup of the world, and they're aping it. They love the things of the world. They don't love the book of Acts the way they should.
My. Well, that certainly is a very good suggestion. Do you have any other insights or things that we should mention?
If any of you are sending money or young people to a school, I think you ought to stop your vacations and go to the schools and ask some questions. Number one, how many preachers do you have on your faculty?
Preachers. Start with
preachers. Start with preachers.
Why do you start with preachers? That's a good
Because that's the New Testament scarlet line of the Lord's work.
And if you don't have preachers on the faculty, they're not going to turn out preachers.
You don't turn out preachers.
Right.
Secondly, in your last year's graduating class, how many were called preachers, and how many were school teachers, and how many were musicians, and how many were this, and how many were that?
Get a breakdown of where they went.
What the percentage of your last year's graduating class?
And especially how many went into the pastoral ministry.
Second. And third, why is it that you don't have militant fundamentalists into your chapel to preach? Why don't you?
Very interesting.
Ask those questions, and you'll get some strange looks to start with. And don't let them snow you. Well, he's a good brother. I didn't ask you if he's a good brother. There are many good brothers in the face of this universe. That's not what I asked you. How many of these are militant fundamentalist preachers that you have in? And when you have conferences, when you have baccalaureates and commencements, how many militant fundamentalists do you have, and how many others do you have? And why are you having the others? And until you stop playing church on this thing, still you stop that, the pastor should say, and the parents should say, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to give you another dime, another cent. I had a call, long-distance call from a frantic parents recently, whose daughter went to a fundamentalist school. She got embroiled into a doctrinal heresy in the school, and they have taken that girl out of school, not the parents, but some people in the school, some adherents of the school, fundamentalist school. They've taken her off. The parents can't reach her. They can't talk to her. And she has become a doctrinal little messiah, led by a little group in a fundamentalist school. They called the school wouldn't touch it. They called pastors, and they wouldn't touch it. And they called me and said, what do you do? I said, you have to face a miserable situation. That school puts school first and the Lord second. The pastors that you call put the school first and the Lord second. And I said, you're going to have to face this alone, you and the Lord, because I said, we've come to this terrible dilemma inside of fundamentalism, that it's schools, my fellowship, my association, my job, my money, my promotion, my this and my that, and the Lord gets last place.
Now, in connection with chapel speakers and so on, you remember my correspondence with you and telephone, and I think also Dr. Dollar recently on Pensacola Christian College?
Yes.
Did they ever get in touch with you?
Never.
Arnold Horton wanted to have, what is this fundamentalist saying, and why aren't we militant fundamentalists? I wrote him, I wrote you.
They
Never
never contacted me once, never wrote me, never called me.
Because you suspected what they were
I knew what they were
had in
having.
the teachers, the faculty.
I knew what they had in the faculty and the alumni and the
They
supporters.
did not impress you as ever being a
Ever,
militant
never,
fundamental school.
never.
They were either modified or at least
Oh,
moderate to the
yes, and there are 4 other classifications. Milk toast.
All right, Dr. Dollar, that was a phone call. We got interrupted, but
I'm
you were
sorry.
saying now with Pensacola Christian College, you never saw that they were fundamentalists. They certainly were militant fundamentalists. They may have been moderate or modified, and then you said there are 4 other classifications. Tell us about that.
Sometimes facetiously, but there are more facts to it than just facetiousness. And that is this: I sometimes say that in addition to the 3 classifications, which I think are labels, not libels, but anyway, in addition to the militant, the moderate, and the modified, I often say that there are 4 others: the milquetoast, the mushy, the morons, and the misfits. Now, you think that's overly harsh and overly critical, but if you've been
interested on those analogies and definitions.
If you've been around as much as I have, you would, after a while, get sick and tired of the hangers-on and the parasites who are inside of fundamentalism and claim they are fundamentalist, and yet they don't have fundamentalist convictions. They look at a book like The History of Fundamentalism and, well, that's a right-wing, far out on the right kind of an opinion and so on. They don't know the history of it. They don't care. They themselves go to churches where there's little or no preaching. They themselves, it's a bread and butter situation where they latch onto a school and sign a doctrinal statement and knowing little or nothing about it. And most doctrinal statements are vacuumous when it comes to fundamentalism. And you could go to fundamentalist schools and look at their doctrinal statements and be new evangelical and wouldn't bother anybody. And I saw years ago, and Pensacola is a grand example of it, and other schools like it. I saw years ago they had nowhere else to go but the general fundamentalist world to appeal to for support and for people and for faculty, and so they called themselves fundamental, small f. But what that really meant was, we're evangelical, but we don't want to be classified with the evangelicals among the Presbyterians and the Reformed and the Lutherans and that crowd. We want to be evangelical over on the fundamentalist wing, but not identify ourselves as fundamentalists. Well, this to me is treacherous, and it's being traitors. And talk about the Los Angeles larceny, I think this is a form of larceny too. I've watched that and I've seen that. I've seen men who can teach for a whole year and never mention the word fundamentalist. If a medical college man on a medical school taught a whole year, never mentioned medicine, the review board would review him in a hurry.
Yeah.
If a law school professor never mentioned law, you'd know that he wasn't there for anything else except a salary check. But we've got so-called fundamental men, fundamental teachers, fundamental schools, and churches that never mention the word. This, to me, is wrong, 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 and always will be wrong. And the students never mention it. You talk to a student from any one of these schools, they'll never mention the word fundamentalism. They just never will. And that's true of your GRB schools. It's true of the fellowship schools. It's true of more and more independent schools. And I have talked to them and talked to faculty members. And they just skirt this whole thing, and they're building a detour so that we can be somehow accepted by the fundamental world as far as money and kids, but we're not fundamentalists. They're traitors to the movement. And you go into churches and you mention fundamentalism, they look at you. You go into schools. Oh, you're a fundamentalist, are you? Yes, and so on. I'll never forget when I preached back in the 60s at Gordon, the last time I was ever there. And I preached on why I'm a fundamentalist, and they laughed and laughed. The faculty and students laughed. And then I said, well...
What year was that? Roughly?
62.
62.
I said, a great man once said, a literal interpretation of the Bible, of course the Bible is the King James.
Surely.
A literal interpretation of the Bible is the best friend sound doctrine ever had. And they laughed and laughed and laughed. I said, the man who said that was A.J. Gordon, who built this place.
Is that right?
Now look at what's happened. Barrington's closed down. No more Barrington.
No more Barrington.
They've closed this year.
Really?
Down faculty, down students, down money. So they've joined up with Gordon.
So, Dr. Dollar, another phone call, but
Well,
you said that I think the students, they've closed up Barrington.
Yeah, it's closed up Barrington.
And they moved into Gordon. Now, tell us about that.
They've moved what few students and few faculty they have, they've moved it into Gordon. And instead of Gordon telling them if they had any Baptist backbone or convictions at all as fundamentalists, they would have said, now look, you've been compromising for years, ever since the days of Terrell Crum and your crazy mania for acceptance in Rhode Island, and having the men there who were known to be not even saved on the faculty and speaking there.
Is that right? Terrell Crum?
Oh, yes.
What year would that have been started?
Oh, that was back in the days of Howard Farron, back in the 40s.
Is that right?
When they started going for a regional accreditation, of course, and Crum was the man who got it. Now, if Gordon had had anybody at the head of it who had any fundamentalist convictions left, they would have said, now look, you've gone the road of compromise for years. You're paying the price. The school is defunct and you're going under. It's too bad because of faculty and students. But we've got enough weaknesses here now. We're not going to add any more diseases to our already sick body. But instead of that, they come out with a big headline in the Gordon alumni paper, two great Christian heritages in New England join hands. Well, that's death amalgamate is what it is.
Death amalgamate.
And they don't know what they're doing up there, and they haven't for 25 years at either school. But they have a charismatic man now at the head of Gordon Conwell.
Really?
Yeah, he's a member of the Assembly of God Church.
What's his name?
Cooley.
Is that right?
Cooley's the head of the seminary.
So what did Ockengate do for all those years?
He led them down the road of compromise and got them prepared to go right into, and they have charismatics teaching on the faculty. One of the main leaders of charismatic in New England, the charismatic movements, on the teaching New Testament at Gordon.
But Ockengate was not supposedly.
No,
yet he was in with the NAE, which is Assembly of God, and tongue-speaking Pentecostals, wasn't he?
But he was open-minded. He was a broad-minded man, and so broad that anybody that called himself a Christian or evangelical was acceptable. Student, faculty, and the last faculty set of pictures that came out in the alumni. Beards on, long beards, looking like a bunch of hairy apes.
Well, how many more years before that'll go the way of Barrington?
Well,
with the liberals coming in and
well,
new evangelicals and compromisers and neo-orthodox
well,
or whatever.
It will continue. It will continue as an institution. It'll have no fundamentalists. It has none now. It really is not even good enough to be called new evangelical school. It's not. It isn't even that sound. But it will continue because Ockengate was smart enough to do one thing, and that is to corral businessmen and head of businesses and rich men into the trustee board, and therefore they were able to get enough money to go ahead and build and get accreditation and get recognized by this.
Invested funds and all.
Invested funds and all that. So it will grow like Harvard has and Yale has.
Apostasy is just like Harvard.
Oh yes, it's apostate now. I would call Gordon.
Is that right? Just a secular school with just a little bit of a sprinkling of Christian terms and all?
A little bit of Christian language with no biblical meaning.
How would you compare it to, say, Fuller? Now, it's a seminary, I realize, but...
Fuller's apostate, has been for years.
That's really down the line.
Oh, down the drain.
Well, here in our own lifetime,
Yes,
Dr. Dollar,
yes.
here's Charles E. Fuller with the evangelistic zeal, now the Sun, and now that thing.
Yeah.
Look how it's gone.
Well,
and here you said Barrington, right up before our very eyes.
Yes.
Here's Gordon going the same way.
Yeah, right in our own generation.
What are we doing here, see? And no safeguards. And
no
it's the same
safeguards.
reason because they do not have those 4 Ds?
They don't have the 4 Ds. They don't have hardly 2 Ds now. They have a little bit of doctrine, not much discipline, no discernment whatsoever. Devotion, yes, they'll bring in devotional speakers, deeper life, Keswick people, and that.
And I want to touch on Keswick before we get you.
That will
bring in that stuff, sugarcoat it.
That will sugarcoat it, and so they'll lead themselves into a self-perpetuating Watergate. And then the constituency is so blinded by the pastors and the so-called teachers, they don't know what's going on, don't care.
You spoke of the Keswick movement, so a while back, you remember I asked you to make a tape. You did. It was a little bit back and forth and clicks, but anyway, a lot of our people have requested this Keswick theology. Now, could you just sort of recapitulate, if you have it at your fingertips, some of the deadly dangers of the so-called Keswick theology? I don't know, you had 5 points, 8 points, 9 points, 10 points?
Well, I think there were 12 weaknesses. Well, I'd mentioned 3 or 4 main ones.
All right, go ahead.
First of all, experience-centered theology. They're like the charismatics in that if I feel something or I feel good about something, or if something touches me, that's the Lord speaking, and therefore I go by that.
Experience-centered.
Experience-centered.
Now, is that biblical or non-biblical?
No, it's non-biblical. Of course,
we do experience some things, but that's not to be our primary.
But that should
interest.
be based on exposition, and with them it's experience versus exposition. They take the experience angle.
Dichotomy there.
Yeah, and the lordship salvation, which is
the second one is lordship salvation.
Lordship.
Now, explain that completely and thoroughly, and what is the heresy and the anti-biblical nature of that position?
Well, you'd have to know quite a bit about the whole Keswick movement to know that in the 50s, men like Alan Redpath and Stephen Olford and George Duncan brought in this lordship salvation into the general Keswick teaching, which had not been there before. Lordship salvation is simply this, that in order for a sinner to be saved, he not only asks Christ to be his Savior, but to be his Lord as well, and therefore becomes not only a sinner saved by grace, but a disciple. And therefore that discipleship teaching, and that following teaching, and that lordship teaching is an ingredient of being saved in the first place.
And that's salvation by works, is it?
Salvation by works. And 90% of the people in America who have been saved by the grace of God never heard of it. I never heard of it, and I was saved for years. But at Columbia Bible College, it came in there and it's taken over there altogether.
Is that right?
And the
lordship salvation.
Lordship salvation. Prairie Bible Institute is just chock full of the stuff. Moody's got a lot of it in their teaching, and of course the Moody station out here propagandizes that stuff.
Right here in Clearwater?
Right here in Clearwater, St. Pete. And they propagandize by bringing in these devotional speakers. And then the third thing that follows with lordship salvation is also, to me, very, very serious, and that is this. They do not face, they do not know, they do not face, nor do they care to face the issues that face us. The cross currents, the compromises, the in-depth erosion and corrosion of convictions and local church and preaching and fundamentalism. To that, they just wave their hand and go on and smile as if the angels in heaven wouldn't have a thing to do with any of that. And it's an attitude of contempt.
The otherworldliness.
Oh, yes, otherworld. They're contemptuous, and they treat you with disdain. If you want to find out how lukewarm and weak a Keswick person is, ask him, what do you think of historic fundamentalism? And years ago, a man gave a definition of fundamentalism, and here it is, and quote from the history of fundamentalism what it is. They'll look at you in blank amazement that you would even dare in this day and time bring up such an unimportant, inconsequential, and meaningless thing. They look at you.
Is that right? And as I recall, you have a positive and a negative. You
Yes.
have all that the Bible teaches and against all the Bible's against. Is that basically what your definition is?
That's it. I've said in many conferences, because I said it in the book, that we expound the Word and expose the world.
Expound the Word and expose the world.
Yes. They will expound in the Bible the devotional passages. They don't expose anything, except fundamentalists who don't go along with them.
But exposition and exposure are necessary. But
Oh,
they
yes.
will expose the fundamentalists.
Oh,
right?
yes. Oh,
they
yes.
certainly are death
oh,
on those.
death on those. They're not death on the liberals.
No.
They've got liberals on the faculties of their schools. They've got liberals in, oh, sure. Columbia Bible College is just loaded down with conventionites.
Oh, my.
Southern Baptists and Presbyterians and Methodists and whatnot.
Is that right?
And one of the professors was proud of the fact that his son was now teaching at Notre Dame. Proud of the fact. He's been there 35 years. You'd think in that time he'd wise up, but he hasn't. He's just mellowed and rotten, going weak and so on.
Right. Now, these 3 points are the main points
There's
of
the main points.
theology.
Another one, of course, is that they don't major on preaching. They're very, very minor on preaching. They will allow for Bible teaching or seminar. They're great on seminars. Everybody's running to or from a seminar or having one. This is the seminaritis.
Seminaritis was Bill Gothard and all this other thing.
They're all for that, and they just swallow that seminaritis. And if somebody can put on a pious look and use some pious language and say 3 times that they love the Lord, then they accept them.
This recent breakup in the home of Joyce Landorf is a strange thing. She was preaching and speaking all the way on homes and so on. All of a sudden, her husband left her. That's a sad commentary, isn't it?
It's happened in more cases than we want to admit in public, that so many of these who have been experts.
Leaders, experts.
Experts on family and home and church and so on.
And Bill Gothard, expert on morals, and Harry's brother Steve was adultery and fornication, or call it what you will, sodomy, actually, in these girls in his own organization, the Bill Gothard organization. And yet Bill Gothard continues as if nothing happened.
Oh, yes.
And apparently going great guns.
Sure.
Hasn't harmed him a bit.
Well, that
sex scandal, it was a horrible disgrace.
That's a commentary on the American blindness, American stupidity.
How can they continue to do that, knowing the facts? Then they excuse him. He just smiles and he cries and they forgive him.
Sure.
What is this business on forgiveness?
Well, they don't have much in the way of convictions. They have a lot of conveniences and connections, and their conscience suffers, and their conscience has been, I think, branded, as the Bible says it has. And, of course, with the Keswick, you have a sweetness and light attitude toward all churches and all denominations. Interdenominational, interdenominational, ecumenical, all that sort of thing. So Billy Graham and the whole, and Billy Graham turns around and gives Columbia Bible College 1,500 acres of land up in the North Carolina mountains.
Is that right?
Yeah, wonderful. You know, it's just wonderful, just glad. And, of course, the Lord did it. Not Graham, but the Lord. Everything comes from the Lord, and we love the Lord. And you poor fundamentalists, it's just too bad that you're so disillusioned. That's their attitude.
You know, getting back to Pensacola Christian, you said that they don't have any fundamentalists there preaching and so on. You know, my son went there for one semester, Dan, and he went there because they claimed to take a stand on the Textus Receptus, the King James Version of the Bible, as the basis.
Yeah.
Didn't go there because of the fundamentalism and separation, because it wasn't there. My wife had asked him, Arlen Horton, the president, in a letter, what about your fundamentalism? And a good friend of ours was mentioning that that is not a fundamentalist school, see? Because that's when I talked to you several summers ago.
Sure.
Well, Dan went there, and they said he could bring his computer. He brought his computer. They went back on their word. They said you can't use your computer on school. I tried to call Horton. He wouldn't be talked to. Call Mrs. Horton, who runs the place apparently.
Sure.
She wouldn't be talked to.
Yeah.
And they wrote some hot, nasty letters to us saying we were overdoting parents just because we tried to get them to honor their word and at least let the boy who was using that computer for his typing and his courses, he didn't buy a typewriter because the computer word processor was what he was going to use. The upshot of it was they refused to let him come back to that school, and they wrote hostile, bitter letters. Now this resulted in a 60-page exposure that we wrote on Pensacola Christian College, question of integrity. Yeah. And I hold Arlen Horton and Mrs. Horton and that whole crowd, Bob, whatever his name, the preacher there, Bob
Taylor,
when we tried to talk to him, he wouldn't do a thing about it.
Oh, no.
Would not. What is wrong with the integrity? Now, when I asked him that letter, when I answered the letter concerning your question about fundamentalism, he wanted to know who is it that said that. I want to talk to that person. I want to get that thing straightened out. I really want to find out how we can be a fundamental school. That bothered him, see. As soon as I wrote him and found out it was Dr. George Dollar, he said, oh, well, we don't have to listen to him. He's this and he's that and he's the other thing. He called me on the telephone and must have talked to me at least 30 to 45 minutes on that issue. But when I tried to call him on this issue, he wouldn't even talk to me. Now, what's the matter of integrity?
Well, you have a little hierarchy there, and you have politics there, and you have a self-perpetuating little Rome that's operating as Pensacola Christian College. And I knew that years ago, the way they handled faculty members, and the way they handled students, was more like the Genghis Khan type of approach.
Really?
Oh yes, I knew that.
What? How did they hack them right off?
They were violent. They were vicious. There was nothing Christian, nothing ethical.
Is it Arlen Horton or is it Becca Horton or both?
Both. He does what she says, and she decides what he ought to do.
Which head's role, in other words?
She's the head of the school.
Is that right?
She's the head, because you go into the bookstore, and over half of the tapes there are hers.
Is that right?
She has more tapes there than all the rest put together. Faculty, visiting speakers, conferences, anything. She has more tapes than all the rest put together. It's a
woman-led school.
John Knox called it petticoat government. When he talked about the Queen of England, petticoat government. And
so you think it's her vendetta? See, they got this dean to write the filthy, vile letter, lying letter. Dean Goddard, you know. But it was, you think, through her.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
And they were irate that I would think to even talk to Bob, what's his name, Taylor. But he's a pastor. I'm a pastor, a minister. I couldn't even call him on the phone. It was horrible. I should never have gotten into it. It had nothing to do with him. It should have been through the academic dean. And I should never have called her. But she's on the advisory committee. She's on the council. What is this?
There's a little Gestapo there, really.
Is that what it is?
It's a little Gestapo. Little
the faculty doesn't have too much sway.
Nothing to say. Nothing. I've talked to
And they're definitely on PhDs, I think, too.
Oh, yes.
Especially, I
Oh,
guess,
yes.
because they know a little bit and more.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, they wouldn't want them there because they would sum up in about 3 weeks what really was going on. Sure, sure. And their word, they'll say that to you and they'll say it to somebody else in order to smooth over in the water so they'll get support. But when it comes right down to facing issues and facts, integrity, they wouldn't know how to spell the word.
Is that right? And they were irate that anybody even
Oh,
questioned their
oh,
integrity.
sure, oh, sure.
And yet,
oh, sure.
what is it if you say to a student, you can come? You know, my son just said, Dad, they lied to me. You know, that's just
Sure,
what it is.
sure.
He can spell it like it is. He's a 19-year-old student. He's transferred now to another school and is very happy. But I just thought I'd mention that on the PCC.
Sure.
Do you have any other comments now, Dr. Dollar, to sum up in our conference that we've had? I certainly appreciate this interview, that you can have in the way of warning, in the way of words of wisdom from your background for our listeners, and that they might be able to profit thereby.
Well, it's going to be harder and harder to be objective. It's going to be harder and harder to be factual. It's going to be harder and harder to be fundamentalist. And it's going to be very, very, very hard to be a militant fundamentalist in this swirling vortex of compromise and cooperation and conventionism and this whole friendly, personable type of nicety that's going on today inside of fundamentalism in the name of fundamentalism. But it's nothing else but politics. It's nothing else but egotism. It's nothing else but empire building. And what I would hope, any of you that hear or see this, hope what you do is to go back to the book of Acts and realize that when the Lord said he built the church, he meant he built local churches. And we ought to have local church schools, local church mission boards, local church institutes, local church tract ministries, local church, and make sure that local church does what the book of Acts says the churches did then.
Well, that's great. We appreciate so much this time that you've taken. Dr. Dollar, Dr. George W. Dollar, would you give your address once more in case you want to write for a catalog, tell about your school, and any of your books? Give that address for the books as well.
Well, the history of fundamentalism, you can still get that.
What does that cost?
$6.95, and you can get that from box 1234 in Sarasota, Florida. You can get the Fight for Fundamentalism, which is an update of that. That's $6.95, same address. Or the New Testament, New Pentecostalism, same address, $3. And then the Facts for Fundamentalism, which is a list of schools, mission boards, and so on, as to whether militant, moderate, or modified, and that's $1. You get the same address. The school, of course, is Liberty School of Theology, 9401 4th Street North, St. Petersburg, Florida.
What's the telephone in case they want to call?
576-1317. We'll be beginning classes September 23rd of this year. 1985. Should you care to come, we'll be offering classes Monday night and Tuesday night, 7 classes in all.
What time is that?
And they start at 6:15 and go through 9:30. And we'd be glad to send you a catalog, and I'll give Dr. Waite 2 or 3 catalogs as he leaves. So in case you want to contact him, he'll have some as well. It's been good to see you again, of course, and always to discuss this, which has been so close to me next to the Bible itself, namely American fundamentalism.
Well, that's great, Dr. Dollar. I appreciate your kindness. And, you know, some pastors ask me, are there any good schools they can recommend as far as separatist schools, Baptist schools?
Yeah.
I think of Pastor Paul Fedena up there in Philadelphia area. He pulled out of the GRBC because of his, you know, his reluctance because of their compromises on the King James Version and so on. And he's in our Dean Burgon Society. He's our treasurer, secretary rather, and we were just meeting this last month. And are there any schools that you could recommend? What would you tell these pastors that are asking for schools? You know, he went to Maranatha, but then they pulled back on the King James. So he got on that. He goes to the Tennessee Temple, but they've got questions here and questions there. And he goes to this school and that school. Is Bob Gray doing anything down there, you think, as far as that's concerned? What are some of these? Of course, you've got your Liberty School that's just beginning now, so it's not yet...
Well, Bob Gray will follow Tennessee Temple, although they have taken quite a strong position on the King James.
Is that right?
And I hope they hold to it. But they will not expose the Southern Baptists.
They will not, as far as the separation, as far as fundamentalism.
No, they will not do that.
And what about Hiles-Anderson? So
Hiles-Anderson will not name the institutions or the schools today of compromise.
Is that right?
They take a positive attitude, and Jack doesn't let them expose anybody by name or the schools by name. I guess Bruce Cummins out in Massillon, Ohio, takes a strong position on the King James.
Yes.
And that would be a school that we could watch and hope that it will survive.
Separatists and fundamentalists in
I
that
hope
story.
so. I hope so, as
But
far as I know.
although Bruce Cummins is one of the Baptist fundamentalists made
Yes,
before,
I know. That was compromised.
That's certainly strange.
So
it's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag everywhere you turn.
There's no real solid. Well, I certainly appreciate this. Has been an interview with Dr. George Dollar. We've kept him going almost 2 hours. This is now 11:54 in the morning, and it's August the 10th, 1985, here in St. Petersburg, Florida. This has been Dr. D.A. Waite, Director of the Bible for Today, and you can write to us for a copy of this cassette, this video cassette recording. Write to us, Bible for Today, 900 Park Avenue, Collingswood, New Jersey. We'd be glad to send it to you and let you know how you can get a copy of it and listen to it for yourself. Thank you, Dr. Dollar. Appreciate you.
This has been a presentation of the Bible for Today, 900 Park Avenue, Collingswood, New Jersey. If you'd like a copy of this video cassette recording, write to us. Send us a gift of $25. Ask for gift offer number 1334 VCR, and we'll send it to you. If you'd like the cassette copy of this, not the VCR, send us a gift of $5 and ask for number 1334. Write to Bible for Today, 900 Park Avenue, Collingswood, New Jersey. Remember John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life.